The house stood silent, its presence looming over the quiet neighborhood like a dark sentinel. Its vacant windows stared out like empty eyes, giving the impression that the house itself was watching, waiting. A Dutch colonial, nestled in the Long Island suburb of Amityville, it was the kind of home that promised peace and tranquility. The manicured lawns and tree-lined streets painted a picture of suburban bliss. But this house held a secret, a darkness that clung to its timbers, whispering of untold horrors. It was a darkness that seemed to seep into the very soul of the building, casting long shadows that danced in the moonlight. On November 13, 1974, the silence of 112 Ocean Avenue was shattered. A darkness born of a horrifying crime emerged, leaving an indelible mark on the house and the community. The DeFeo family, who had lived there, met a tragic and violent end. 6 lives were brutally taken, a family wiped out in a single night. The crime scene was a grim tableau of violence, with police and emergency lights casting eerie glows on the house's facade. The DeFeo murders, as they became known, sent shockwaves through the quiet community. The news spread quickly, and the once peaceful neighborhood was thrust into the national spotlight. The brutality of the murders was almost too much to comprehend, and the community was left reeling. Whispers of a haunting followed, tales of strange occurrences within the home's walls. Neighbors spoke of ghostly figures, mysterious lights, and strange shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The house, with its distinctive gambrel roof and dormer windows, became an emblem of evil. It was a stark reminder of the violence that had unfolded within its walls. This is the story of the Amityville Horror, a tale that has captivated and terrified people for decades. The house's sinister reputation grew, fueled by the chilling accounts of those who dared to enter. It was a place where the line between reality and the supernatural seemed to blur. Neighbors spoke of a palpable sense of dread, a chill that clung to the air around the property. The once vibrant community was now overshadowed by the house's dark legacy. The DeFeo murders were brutal, the details too gruesome to ignore. The sheer violence of the crime left an indelible mark on the collective memory of the community. But it was the aftermath, the stories of the supernatural, that truly captured the public's imagination. Accounts of paranormal activity, eerie sounds, and ghostly apparitions turned the house into a legend. The Amityville Horror became more than a crime scene. It became a symbol of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of ordinary life. A reminder that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are the ones that hide in plain sight. The DeFeo family seemed, on the surface, like any other. They were a typical American family living in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Amityville, New York. Their home, a large Dutch colonial house, stood as a symbol of their seemingly perfect life. Parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, strived to provide for their 4 children, Ronald Jr., Dawn, Allison, and John. They were active in their community, attending church regularly and participating in local events. To outsiders, they appeared to be living the American dream. But behind closed doors, a darkness festered. Ronald Sr. was known for his explosive temper, ruling his family with an iron fist. His authoritarian ways created a tense and fearful atmosphere within the household. The children often found themselves walking on eggshells, trying to avoid their father's wrath. Ronald Jr., or Butch as he was called, bore the brunt of his father's rage. He was a troubled young man, struggling with substance abuse and behavioral issues. The constant pressure and abuse from his father only exacerbated his problems, leading to frequent conflicts and violent outbursts. The tension in the house was palpable, a pressure cooker waiting to explode. Family dinners were often silent affairs, with each member lost in their own thoughts, dreading the next eruption of anger. The children, especially Butch, felt trapped in a cycle of fear and resentment. On that fateful night, evil descended upon the DeFeo home. The house, which once stood as a beacon of normalcy, became the setting for an unimaginable horror. The darkness that had been brewing within its walls finally reached a breaking point. Shortly after 3 a.m., Butch DeFeo grabbed his father's .35 caliber rifle. The weapon, a symbol of his father's power and control, was now in his hands. Butch, driven by a mix of rage, desperation, and possibly something more sinister, decided to take matters into his own hands. He methodically walked from room to room, ending the lives of his parents and siblings as they slept. Each step he took was deliberate, each action calculated. The silence of the night was shattered by the deafening sound of gunfire echoing through the house. The murders were swift and brutal, each victim shot once in the back. The sheer violence of the act was shocking, leaving the once peaceful home drenched in blood and chaos. The DeFeo family, who had once seemed so ordinary, were now the victims of a horrific crime. Butch later claimed that voices in the house, voices he believed belonged to demons, had driven him to the horrific act. He described hearing whispers and commands, urging him to commit the unthinkable. Whether these voices were real or a manifestation of his troubled mind remains a mystery. The scene that greeted investigators was nothing short of horrific. The once tidy and orderly home was now a gruesome crime scene. Bloodstains marked the walls and floors, and the air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and death. 6 bodies lay sprawled in their beds, their lives extinguished in a night of unimaginable violence. The DeFeo family, who had once been a picture of normalcy, were now forever etched in history as the victims of one of the most notorious family annihilations in American history. Butch DeFeo was apprehended the day after the murders. He confessed to the crimes, but his story took a bizarre turn. He claimed that voices, whispering from the depths of the house, had compelled him to kill his family. The voices, he insisted, belonged to demons that had possessed the house. His defense team, hoping for a plea of insanity, played up these claims. They painted a picture of a young man driven to madness by unseen forces. The prosecution, however, argued that Butch's actions were premeditated. They pointed to his calm demeanor after the murders, his attempts to create an alibi. They presented evidence of Butch's troubled past, his history of drug use and violence, to support their case. The jury ultimately rejected Butch's insanity plea. He was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. To this day, he remains incarcerated, his claims of demonic possession echoing through the halls of criminal history. Just over a year after the DeFeo murders, a new family moved into 112 Ocean Avenue. The house, with its dark windows and eerie presence, stood as a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. Yet, the new occupants were undeterred by its grim history. George and Kathy Lutz, along with Kathy's 3 children, were filled with hope. They envisioned a bright future in their new home, a place where they could leave behind their past troubles and start anew. The children, too, were excited about the move, imagining endless adventures in their spacious new abode. They saw the large Dutch colonial as a fresh start, a place to build new memories. The house, with its charming architecture and ample space, seemed perfect for their needs. They could already picture family gatherings, holidays, and countless happy moments within its walls. They were aware of the home's tragic past, but they dismissed the rumors of a haunting as mere superstition. After all, they reasoned, how could a house, no matter its history, hold any power over them? They were determined to make it their own, to fill it with love and laughter. Little did they know that they were stepping into a nightmare. The house, with its dark secrets and malevolent presence, was waiting for them. It had been biding its time, and now, with new occupants, it was ready to unleash its horrors once more. The Lutzes paid a shockingly low price for the house, a steal for a property of its size and location. They couldn't believe their luck. It seemed too good to be true, and in a way, it was. The low price was a reflection of the house's dark reputation, a fact that they chose to overlook. But the bargain they thought they were getting would soon turn into a terrifying ordeal. The house, with its flickering lights and ominous atmosphere, began to reveal its true nature. The Lutzes, who had been so full of hope, now found themselves gripped by fear. From the moment they moved in, strange things began to happen. It started with small, inexplicable occurrences. Objects would move on their own, and cold spots would appear in the warmest rooms. The family tried to rationalize these events, but the unease grew. Foul odors permeated the air despite their best efforts to air out the house. The smells were unlike anything they had encountered before, a mix of decay and something far more sinister. No amount of cleaning or ventilation could rid the house of these noxious fumes. Doors slammed shut on their own, and disembodied voices whispered through the halls. The whispers were faint at first, barely audible, but they grew louder and more insistent. The family could no longer ignore the signs that something was terribly wrong. The Lutzes, initially skeptical, slowly began to realize that something was terribly wrong. Their skepticism turned to fear as the paranormal activity escalated. They felt trapped, unable to escape the malevolent force that seemed to control their home. Their dream home was becoming a prison of fear. The once hopeful family now lived in constant dread, their every moment overshadowed by the house's dark presence. The Lutzes were caught in a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. At first, the occurrences were subtle. A cold spot in the sewing room, a strange odor of perfume in the air. But soon, the phenomena escalated. One of the first disturbing signs was a swarm of flies. In the dead of winter, with windows sealed tight, the house became infested with the buzzing insects. They clustered around George Lutz, drawn to him as if he were a magnet. Then came the nightmares. Every member of the family was plagued by vivid, disturbing dreams. George dreamt of the murders, the screams of the DeFeo family echoing in his ears. Kathy found herself levitating in her sleep, an unseen force lifting her from the bed. The children, too young to understand the horrors unfolding around them, grew increasingly withdrawn and fearful. The atmosphere in the house was thick with dread, the air heavy with a sense of unseen eyes watching their every move.